Everybody doesn't have my back, no, no. My body, no, no. I keep dancing with it. Everybody doesn't have my back, no, no. My body, no, no. I keep dancing with it. Everybody doesn't have my back, no, no.
Computer, this is Data.
I'm an android.
Rangers pick basketball.
I was processing all of the information.
Processing.
It's one of those idiots who believe in analytics. Rangers pick basketball. Analytics was crap.
Does not compute.
Just because you got good stats doesn't mean you're a good team.
All right, hello everyone. Welcome to the Lakers Exceptionalism Podcast. My name is Tom Z, joined as always by Tim, aka Rangers Pick Basketball. And today we are live on playback, starting our summer series. We are excited today to have Zach Milner from the Tag the Roll community on to discuss some of the guys we just saw.
Doing pretty good. Thanks for having me. Excited to talk some basketball, some draft.
Yeah, like I said, we're doing it live here. But Zach, thanks for joining us. We talked a little bit on our last podcast how we've done so many draft pods before, and it's just like you're throwing so many darts, and like so few of them come to fruition. Even though it is a great hypothetical, and I know you're a draft guy, so I definitely have a different perspective than you do. But we decided this year to just keep it like to a couple dart throws, and then we'll talk about who we get kind of more specifically in depth once we know who it is.
Yeah, I think that makes sense, honestly. For me, it, like you said, I'm different because I do the draft. So like I just like seeing everyone for every team. But when it's talking about a specific team, it's pretty hard to pinpoint where they go. You see a lot of rumors, and sometimes the mock drafts have something to them, sometimes they don't. So you just gotta try. Last year I didn't even know they were going to pick Max Christie. He was just one of my favorite guys all year, so it ended up working out for him.
Yeah.
But yeah, you have no idea. So it makes a lot more sense to just do a couple of like quick hitters before the draft, and then after the draft, do more deep dives.
Yeah, for sure. I had a good time though trying to grab some of this footage. It just gave you a glimpse, to get a feel for these players. You got to watch them in game. You got to watch a lot more than just clips, but it gives us a basis to work off of.
Yeah, it's that time of year again. Lakers have picks this time. I know there have been a couple of years where it's like, we don't want the pick, or we're trying to trade the pick away. I don't know if the Lakers are going to actually draft or not, but they do have both a first rounder and a second rounder. So that gave us a good bit of players to try to pay attention to. It's not like when you have Lakers have the second pick where you're looking at like 5 or 6 guys. There's definitely more of a spread, and that's when I don't know. There's just so many possibilities. It's so fun to just watch all the coverage, listen to all the coverage, watch a bunch of film, dig into the data. And Zach, you've crafted a nice menu of players I think that we're going to dig into today that intrigue me in a lot of different ways. Some guys, grade out real well in the data, others not as much, but they've got some good traits. Some guys I see, coming from, I feel like Seth Lundy coming from that offense, operating around one guy that's got a ton of gravity, maybe translates a little bit more to like a LeBron James AD offense, whereas other guys, operating in offenses that are more set plays and motion and stuff like that. So I don't know. It's always tricky, not just saying like, how good is this guy today, but how do they translate? And then the part that is just well beyond me is, all right, well then what does that mean for them like long term? What can they turn into? I feel like we can, if you give us enough time, we can tell you, all right, this is what they are right now, but figuring out, adding in that level of competition and then trying to project 3, 4, 5 years down the line, which I think the Lakers are at that point where it's, we want to compete now, but we also are going to need to, at some point here, be rebuilding. So it's good to have guys who have that long-term potential as well. It creates, I don't know, a fun dynamic. There's so many different ways to approach this if you're the Lakers.
Yeah. And on top of that, it's so important to hit on your draft picks in terms of a roster building or construction standpoint as well, especially when you can get guys who can produce on rookie contracts, whether it's first round or second round. Having kind of production on that cheap of a contract is just very, very valuable, especially for teams who are limited with their cap space. So, hitting on one or both of these picks is going to be important if they keep them. And I mean, they've done a really, really great job over the last few years. So they should get the benefit of the doubt, even if they pick someone that I'm not even a fan of. But yeah, just hitting on these players on cheap contracts is going to be important for any contender.
And that was true under the last CBA, and I feel like that might be even more true under this new one. But, depending on if you have a billionaire owner who can, light money on fire to get, I'm talking about the Suns. But we're going to talk about that a little bit on tomorrow's show. Let's dive straight in. I really liked also, like Tim said, the selection of players you had for us, Zach. And let's start off with Jett Howard. I'm going to throw it to you as I try to pull up. I have some footage, but we can just talk over it. What did you see in Jett Howard, Michigan Wolverines player?
Yeah, so Jett is someone who I really, really liked early on in the season, like the first half of the year. I thought he was really, really awesome, was playing like a top 10 to top 12 guy. Then he hurt an ankle and he pretty much struggled the rest of the year. He had 2 hurt ankles this year, which was pretty unfortunate for him. When he got hurt, a lot of people have been talking about Kobe Bufkin as well, and that's when he started to play a lot better. But going back to Jett is the thing with him that makes it so interesting is he had one of the best month and a half starts to the season out of any freshman in college basketball. And then after that, it just went downhill from there. His shot wasn't as good, wasn't able to create as good of looks, which wasn't even a strength of his in the first place. But the sell for him is he's just a really intriguing shooter who can shoot at high volume with decent size on the wing, can play off the ball, is capable of running off of staggers and off screens and curling and pin downs. He can curl and finish at the rim or make the kick out. He has shown a little bit of off the dribble shot making with self creation. He doesn't have the best burst to get all the way to the rim for a good look, but he has some decent handles for his size to where he can get some mid range shots and has done some nice spin moves and stuff to get over. And one thing that he can do with his size is be able to shoot over smaller players. But yeah, the sell for him is just his offense. Early on in his career, I think it's best to use him off ball, let him run off of screens or spot up and shoot, and he can attack some contests as well. And I think over time, when you get to year 2 or year 3, then you start letting him do some DHO or some side pick and rolls and see if he can continue to improve that way. But going to the defensive side of things with him, that's where a lot of my concerns come in with. And I think that was going to be the reason where it's going to decide whether he's an NBA player or not. If he can hold up to a certain extent on the defensive end, I think he's going to be a good rotation player, maybe even better than that. But he was just a pretty poor defender all year long. I will say where he was in the first 4 to 5 games this year was just really, really rough. As you go on through the year, he did show improvements on that end. Still was not a positive defender, but seeing the improvements was great. I will say his best skill on defense is probably his recovery. But the problem with that is he's also the reason he's having to recover in the first place. He is good, not the best with screen navigation, but when he's from behind, he's able to contest his shots from behind, or he recovered with his length, or even when he gets beat on the perimeter, he's able to contest a shot at the rim from behind, use his length to block a shot. So that's his best goal on the defensive end. But off ball, he, like I said, showed improvements, but he's not always locked in. So trying to figure out how he can find his worth on the defensive end is important. But there are some guys who are that good of offensive players to where their offense outweighs the defense. And when you're next to LeBron and AD, I think you can sometimes deal, like if you can bring that much more on offense, it's sometimes worth it.
An issue, or I guess a concern, I'll phrase it as a concern that I have, is if you forecast him as more of an off-ball player, I think that is part of the tricky situation where you have negative defenders, is for them to generate, not just be good on offense, but generate impact on offense, you need to have more volume. And to have more of that volume, you probably need to be on ball a bit more, or be like an off-screen guy that's more of a centerpiece of the offense. I guess short term, I'd worry about if he is just more of a spot up guy. And in college, 42% of his half court points were on spot ups. If that's primarily what he's doing, I feel like that caps you somewhat. When I think through, though, the different levels of spot up shooting, would you say he would be more of a stationary shooter, kind of needs to be standing still to put shots up, or would you see him more as like a movement shooter that's able to relocate, fade up to the corner, lift up to the wing, catch and shoot, maybe without being like fully set? I think that could be a way for him to get more volume, even if he is just in a spacer role.
Yeah, definitely. I definitely think he has the movement shooting to him where he doesn't have to be stationary. And I think what you brought up is, I think that's a concern that's very, very fair. And it's tough when you're a team like the Lakers, who want to win now. It makes it tougher for these players, but trying to balance out finding that guy who can still contribute a little bit right now, but has the upside to become a bigger player over the next couple of years. Pretty much where they're picking, you're going to have someone with flaws. And most of the guys the Lakers are going to pick aren't going to be on the ball very often. So yeah, you can go after someone who is a better defender. But I do think he can bring more volume off the ball because of more value off the ball, though, because of the volume. And you can have that shooting gravity. It will take time for a rookie to actually earn that respect, obviously. But I do have faith in him as a shooter, to where if he has high volume from shooting and he's running off of screens, or even just relocating and all that kind of stuff, that can make it difficult for the defense, but just makes it easier on LeBron, easier on AD.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, in his role in college, using our B-ball index methodology, he was a movement shooter. So I feel like it would somewhat be an apples to apples. We've seen him do that job. Just plop him into this offense, do the same job. In that way, you could feel a bit more comfortable about what he would bring to the table. It's not like you're asking a very heavy on-ball guy to suddenly be an off-ball guy. So that way it makes me feel more comfortable. But defensively, we don't quite have the data for me to calculate defensive roles. But between, a point of attack, more of a off-ball guard, like chaser role, a wing stopper, more of an off-ball wing kind of helper, or is he more of a low activity, go hide him away in the corner? Where do you see his defensive role playing out in the NBA?
So I think the hope for him is going to be he can turn into this guy who's defending wings. I don't think he'll ever be an above average or a wing stopper, but I do think one thing that we have learned over the last few years, or even longer, but by watching a lot of NBA, is just having size on the perimeter as a wing does have some value to it, even if you aren't a great defender. I think we've seen it with multiple teams and multiple players. So I think that is the ideal hope for him, is just being in that wing stopper role that you mentioned. But there definitely is a chance that he is someone that you will have to hide, and that is the concern with him. And that's why he might not become this guaranteed rotation player. But yeah, I would say the wing stopper role is where you want him to get to. I don't think he has the best screen navigation. He has gotten better with some off-ball stuff, but it's not that I'm very optimistic there. But yeah, like I said, having that kind of size, it does have some value. And if he can get a little bit quicker, staying in front of people, that with his recovery and some decent length can still bring value to the defensive side of things.
Yeah. And one area where size is also really helpful is rotating as an off-ball defender, being able to tag a roll man or cut off a drive from a, I don't know, rotational tendency standpoint. Is he someone that's on time with those and active with them, or is that an area of the game that you'd be a little bit more worried about? Because this is an area that for the Lakers specifically, we just saw them come off a year where they were pretty solid switching, pretty solid in drop, but they couldn't quite run other pick and roll coverages, not because AD had any mobility issues, but because the guards and the wings behind it didn't have the rotation ability and or size to effectively, at a team level, show and recover or soft hedge and then recover. How would he fit into that puzzle?
So he shows some of that stuff, but it's inconsistent. There are times where he completely misses some easy reads that you should be doing on defense, and there's times where he's slow to react. So this is where some of my defensive concerns mostly come is because of the off-ball stuff. But like I said, showed a little bit of flashes there, just inconsistent, but it did get better as the year went on. The first 4 or 5 games of the year, I had very little optimism. I won't say I'm confident it's going to be a positive at the next level now, but watching how he was the last 20, 25 games or whatever, there definitely is more room to have hope there.
Nice. Sweet. All right. An interesting player to start with. Tom, any more questions, or we can move on to Nick Smith?
No, yeah, let's move on to Nick Smith, who I thought was an interesting player as well. He obviously has a lot of athleticism. I think he is extremely good at getting to the rim. His floater game, I don't know about from what I saw, the small sample size, he throws up a lot of off-balance stuff. A lot of it goes in. But what do you think, Zach? He seems like somebody who, if he can get his body control, some of his timing and his reads down, he could be an interesting player.
Yeah, so heading into this year, I came in thinking that he might have had the best touch out of any guard in this class. His floaters were really, really impressive back in high school. I thought his contested finishing through contact before college as well was very, very impressive. I want to say the film this year was not that great. The numbers this year were not that great, and it does make it a tough sell for him. But it's worth remembering that he did deal with a knee injury heading into the year, and there were reports that it was bothering him throughout the year. So obviously from any team perspective, they have to make sure they feel confident with his health stuff going forward. But when you're looking at his film and his numbers, just keep that in mind, that he wasn't 100%. But going back to what I saw, yeah, he puts up a lot of floaters. I'm very confident in the touch. My question with him, though, heading into the year and throughout the year is how often is he going to be able to get to the basket himself without needing a screen or just like in isolation? And even with the screen, is he going to be able to get to the basket whenever he wants? Because with him, my question was, all right, he's a really good passer, actually. I like what he showed a lot in high school. Really good finisher, really good floaters. But is he going to be good enough to create shots consistently for himself and for other people? Or is it going to be consistently getting tough shots that he has to rely on tough shot making? And over the years, something that I've learned, I think back a few years ago, I was a lot more optimistic in players who had to rely on tough shot making translating to the league, and I don't think it's that easy to actually have that stuff translate. So I would have loved to see him create easier shots this year for himself and for teammates, but I really do think that he showed even better handles this year, which did help him create some good looks. Even though he wasn't getting to the basket as much as I wanted, he still was able to create space and some step backs or get into his mid-range shot because his handles looked more shifty this year than it did last year.
Tim, you mentioned in the chat. Sorry, I was just gonna try and bounce it to you too about this data here. It speaks a lot. I know Zach was talking a lot about, him as a player more in depth, but the data speaks too. I don't know. You read this data in a certain way, Tim. I wanted to bounce that to you.
Yeah. So not just with the synergy data is part of it, and looking at his effectiveness in different areas. I see that spot ups are really the only play type he was efficient in among the ones that he did with any regularity. Like, he was not effective in transition with handoffs, as a pick and roll player, as an ISO guy, as an off screen guy. Like, other things he did, he wasn't great at. Now, not the largest of samples, 17 games here. Something that also stands out to me looking at our college LeBron data, so our impact data, luck adjusting, and looking at box score impact as well as on-off impact, 16th percentile D LeBron among college players. That stands out to me. He was the 4,229th ranked player on the court from an impact standpoint and was 10th on his own team defensively. So for me, that worries me. And I'm wondering if that matches what you were seeing on film. Because offensively, he shot, again, not big samples, but about 43% on spot up threes. 63% of his spot ups resulted in 3-pointers, whereas for Howard, it was like 93%. So he's attacking closeouts a bit more. He's got that middle game with the touch, like you were talking about with the floater. So I don't know. He's got a little bit more juice, I think, as an off-ball guy in different ways. But defensively, is he someone that you think can stay on the court? And how do you see him slotting in from a skill set standpoint into a role?
Yeah, so I want to go back to the offense and his usage as well. But we'll start off with the defense first. His defense. He was an interesting guy on the defensive end this year. I thought there were some games, especially if you look at like the last few games in March, which is not a great sign, but he was just horrendous on the defensive end. But then you go and look at certain plays from him, and he actually shows a lot of effort on that end, trying to get over screens, blow up ball screens, and all that kind of stuff and disrupt plays, to where I don't think he was a positive defender in college. But I do think there is reason to be optimistic with him. And I actually think over the years with college defenders or how they were in college to the NBA, sometimes it isn't as easy as, he was a bad defender in college, he's going to be bad in the NBA, or he was good then, will be good now. I want to say there's a little bit more wiggle room on the defensive end, even though it is always great to see that kind of stuff. But with him, I do think there is a little bit more room for optimism on that end. But there's no way to really sugarcoat it. He was just a bad defensive player this past year, so I'm not too shocked by the numbers that you came up with there.
And then I guess getting back to the offensive end, talk to us a bit about that. I know you said he didn't play a ton. There were some injuries playing a factor here. Wasn't quite himself. Does the inefficiency worry you, or is this something that we see with prospects that are in larger offensive roles, and then they've got the talent, so they're given more opportunity, and sometimes that's hard, and they end up putting it together and figuring it out in the NBA? Like, how are you looking at that? Is that a negative for you, and does that change for a team like the Lakers, who might be looking for a guy to contribute immediately, versus maybe a lottery team that is saying, all right, we like the long-term upside of this guy?
So for me personally, I don't care too much about the inefficiency. I definitely think it's something to know, and it is important. But I think with him, he's someone where I've gone back and I'm going to value the high school stuff just a tad more because of the injury stuff that I mentioned, as well as the Arkansas context. Their roster construction was just awful, unfortunately. They had pretty much zero shooters on the floor at all times besides him. So when he had the ball in his hands, they had no one to space the floor. So that also made it tough for him to create good looks. And then when he's off the ball, he's pretty much the only shooting threat. So this is a tough offense to really be efficient in, I feel like. But I do like his ability to play both on and off the ball. I mentioned some of my concerns with the on-ball stuff, but I also mentioned what I like about him. With the off-ball stuff, though, I didn't really talk about it. One thing that I think he does extremely well is he's good at knowing when to attack before he catches the ball when the pass is coming. So he'll already get the momentum downhill to get an extra step on his guy, which that can help make up for some lack of burst for some players. He's also a really smart mover off the ball, knows how to attack the gaps or relocate along the perimeter. So I do like his ability both on and off the ball. But when you look about it from the Lakers' perspective, it's tough, right? They're picking in the middle of the first round this year. This is where you can find some upside swings, but they might be a team that wants to get more of a safe guy. How I view this class is, I think from like the 6 or 7, maybe even the 5 to like 18, 19 range, there's a big group of players. So you're picking at the back end of this range. You're still going to find players that fall to you and that you're going to like a lot. Once you get past that, you can go into like the mid 20s, and you could probably find someone who is maybe able to produce more now, but doesn't have that same kind of upside. So it just depends on what you think you want for the Lakers, or how they feel in their approach of like, okay, can we get these kind of rotation players this offseason in free agency, or do we need to, or can we not be as patient with one of these draft guys? We need to find someone who can produce right now. And that could influence how you view someone like Nick Smith, because he probably is going to take a little bit longer for him to come around, I think, even than someone like Jett Howard, who we just talked about, even if Jett is still a freshman as well.
Yeah, good call out. Setting the right expectations will be important, and understanding, all right, this guy's going to contribute year 1 versus 2 versus 3, I think could be really important. Like, we saw Reeves immediately be able to be good for the Lakers. Max Christie, did okay in his minutes, but he's more of a year 2 guy. And that was something that was called out by many immediately when he was drafted. I was hoping he'd be able to do a little bit more, but that's not necessarily bad pick or this guy isn't good. It's everyone has their own timeline, and it's just about understanding what that is and having that cohesion and synergy with the front office when it comes to free agency, so that between the two areas of grabbing more talent, you're able to address those needs. So I think that's a really good call out.
Yeah, and maybe they feel confident where Max Christie is now to where they think he'll be a solid rotation player next year, and they're okay taking another guy who's a year away. That's very possible. So it'll be interesting to see how they approach it, but that's a big part of who they should pick, is what they want to do. And if they do want someone now, I wouldn't mind seeing if anybody wants to trade up, and you can trade back 10 picks and maybe grab a future second in the trade as well and get another asset possibly. Who knows?
Zach, who do you think are some other guys on the fringe of that range that you mentioned that either could be available or might be, just give me a couple names. I know, we talked about Jordan Hawkins on our FIBA or our Euro basket.
Yeah, I'm more than happy to talk about Jordan Hawkins more.
Just give us whoever you think would be a good fit.
Yeah, Jordan Hawkins, I think, would be a very interesting fit. One of the better shooters in this class. Really, really good movement shooter who gets his feet set extremely quick, and he will run hard off of screens. He's just not going to be like a running off. Like, he will run really hard off of screens. So like having someone having to trail him all game seems like hell. If he's able to get those kind of minutes, that can bring a lot of value to an offense. He is someone who doesn't get to the rim as much as you'd like. He's an off-ball player, doesn't get to the rim as much as you'd like still in that sense, but I do think he showed a little bit of more improvements with that in the last month and a half. He is someone where I've actually been a little bit higher on than others in terms of his drive game and in terms of his on-ball stuff. Not something where I'm extremely confident in it, but I thought he showed enough to where I'm okay thinking there's some kind of upside or some kind of potential there, even if it's not that likely. There is some potential. On the defensive end, I actually like his off-ball defense a decent amount for his size. He's obviously wish he was a little bit taller, wish he was a little bit stronger, but I think he's a pretty smart defender who, sure, he has some inconsistencies on that end, but I think a lot of people in college have some flaws on that end. And in this class in general, I thought this was a pretty low field class, unfortunately, where there were so many defensive questions off the ball with so many players that someone like him, who might not have been the guy who makes the most happen, just doing some of the fundamentals on defense stood out a lot more this year. So I do like what he can do as an off-ball defender, just being smart on that end, but being a true movement shooter who can just be hell for defense to have to worry about all game if he projects to the next or translates to the next level.
Are there any guys that, if from a Laker fan perspective, being drafted at 17, you'd be unhappy with? I know we want to give the benefit of the doubt to the Lakers with how well they've done, but would there be any guys that you'd be like, if they went for?
I really think this is a range where so many of the guys might just fall to where there's not that many bad options, which I think is really good for them. A few of the guys that are going around their projected range that I'm a little bit lower on is like Noah Clowney. I don't think that will be a great pick if they pick him at 17. but he does have some potential as someone who's big who can shoot and has nice movement abilities. Like there is some potential there. I'm just lower on him. He's someone where I would have loved to see him go back to school, and I would take him there possibly next year if he showed improvements. But using a top 20 pick on him right now is not where I'm at. I'm trying to think of who else there is. That's really it. I think this is actually a really, really good range to be in the draft. And obviously not everyone who goes in the 15 to 23 range is going to work out. It just doesn't work out that way. But I think this is a really nice spot to be, to where you're going to get someone with a good chance to be a rotation player. You just got to put them in a position to succeed, know what you're getting into with them, because so much about rookies and role players in general is if you don't put them in a position to succeed, you put them in the wrong role, they will fade out. And if you go back, I always say this, and I think there's so many rotation players over in Europe who could probably be rotation players in the NBA if they were given the right position. And there are guys in the NBA who are in the right role, and if they were in the wrong role, they probably wouldn't have NBA jobs. So just knowing what you're getting yourself into with the player and putting them in the right position is really, really important, especially with a rookie who's trying to get confidence in the league as well.
Love it. All right, Zach, we're going to do a speed round here because Lakers do have a second round pick. They might trade their both picks, one pick, who knows? But give us a couple second round guys here that you like.
Yeah, so Julian Strawther is definitely someone who stands out. Seth Lundy as well. But starting with Strawther, just a really, really good shooter. He is someone who can shoot off movement, but it's more of him like backpedaling into shots or coming off of screens and fading and flaring out more than curling and getting right into a shot while turning. That's something where I think Seth Lundy does better. But Strawther has been an awesome shooter for multiple years. His volume didn't go up this year as much as you'd want, but I think that mostly has to do with their guard play in Gonzaga was not to the level that it was last year. They didn't have Andrew Nembhard this year, so it was just much harder to get good looks. I wanted to see him show more perimeter game this year, which he did not do well. They started off trying to have him do that stuff early in the season, didn't go too well, so later second half of the year, they played him more off the ball again, like he was in the past, and became really good there. I think he might have the best floater in college, which is cool to see him like just come off of pin down staggers or attack closeouts and get to his floater. Really, really good job of doing that. But yeah, he's just going to be a 3-point specialist for the most part. He can't do too much else. Don't have faith with him on the defensive end either. But if you can find someone who is a really good shooter in the second round, even if they are flawed and they will have some questions in the playoffs, it does bring some value to have that kind of shooter, especially around guys who get the gravity like LeBron and AD do. And Seth Lundy, going to him, very similar kind of profile of being some really, really good shooter. I think Lundy has more of a perimeter game than Strawther does, has more defensive potential than Strawther does. But overall, Strawther is the better shooter. So it's quite, and it doesn't mean Seth Lundy isn't a good shooter, just not to the level of Strawther. And it becomes a good like philosophical question of, okay, if you're drafting this guy to be a 3-point shooter, do you want the guy who's a better shooter, or do you want the guy who can do a little bit of other things, even if it's not to a good enough level? So I think that's an interesting conversation between those two.
I think, Zach's doing a good job finding guys who would be shooters. I think that's probably, requisite number one. They need to be able to do that. The defense would be, hopefully good. And I mean, I see Lundy's got a 6'10" wingspan. That's wild for a 6'4" guy. I'm looking at his synergy data right now. He's at 39% on his spot up threes, and Strawther was at I think it was 45%, although Lundy took like 50 more threes on spot ups this year. So he's got some of that volume in there that like makes me trust the number just, even more than it otherwise would at a lower volume. But it's not that Strawther didn't have good volume either. But I don't know. Either way, I feel like second round, grab a shooter could be nice. You've got Cole Swider still around, and he might be more of an off-screen shooter than either of these guys. But more of the spot up, if they could just be enough to be a 3-and-D guy, just be like 3 and passable D would be a nice boost on this team, because the Lakers in the playoffs were, I don't know. I don't want to go into a situation where we're running 3-guard lineups out there again. Just give me someone who can stay on the court and space the floor.
Right. And just to go off the volume point that you brought up, I will say Lundy doesn't have the history of being a good shooter, while Strother does. You can go back and look at Lundy's percentages last year. They weren't that good. Strother has been a good shooter for multiple years and still had fine volume. But yeah, when you go to the percentages, Lundy, like I said, was shooting much more difficult shots. He was the guy who was coming off screens and turning and curling them and turning midair. Wasn't getting fully set, while Strother used to be a little bit more set, while he still can do some relocation and stuff like that. But when we're talking about these 3-point specialists, it's tough. We're in second round, but at the same time, all these guys are going to be going in the mid 40s for a reason. So they're going to be flawed. But moving on to Jordan Miller, he is someone where the shot is actually a question mark with him. He shot much better this year than he had in the past, and that's the intrigue with him. He is someone where if the shot does come around, he probably will be a rotation player in the NBA. I think he is a really fun offensive player outside of the shot. He can do a little bit of stuff on the ball at the next level. I don't really expect that to fully translate, but when you look at these role players in the NBA and you go back and see how they played in college, a lot of them had bigger roles in college. They had to scale back their game, and you like to see those extra things in college. He can do a little bit of stuff with the ball, but he's a really, really fun connector. He has really quick reads on the perimeter with quick swing passes, or can hit cutters quickly, can attack a closeout and dump it off. The question with him is he going to be a good enough shooter to have defenses respect him and not help off of him and hurt spacing? Up until this past year, I was skeptical with the shot. This year, he showed a lot of improvements there, to where I am at least cautiously optimistic. I think that is a swing skill for him. If he can be an average shooter where defenses aren't totally ignoring him, I really like him as an NBA guy. Really good length he has. And then on the defensive end, really, really smart off-ball defender while being a capable on-ball defender. Probably average to a little bit like average. I'd say about average on ball, but above average off ball defender. So once again, with him, unlike the other guys, is he can do a lot of different things. It just comes down to, will his shot be good enough to stay on the NBA floor?
7-foot wingspan looks nice.
Yeah, very nice. I was a little disappointed with his height, with his height measurement at the combine. I was hoping it was going to be an inch taller, and that was what I expected. But the wingspan is very, very good. He has done a really good job. Like, I went back and rewatched some of their film last year against Paolo and Jabari Smith and all that stuff, and he did a pretty good job against them. Was able to attack switches when he had Walker Kessler on him, when he had Mark Williams on him. He was able to get by them and get to the basket. Just a really, really fun player. I would say he might not have been their best scorer this year, but I think he was Miami's best player this past year and their most important player for sure. And he is someone where I personally would take him and look at him at the end of the first round, but he does not seem like he's someone who's going to be even guaranteed to be getting drafted. So if he's available at the Lakers second round pick, I think he would be a pretty good pick.
Interesting. Something that is really odd that stands out to me with his game offensively is that based on which play types he operated through in the half court, with a lot of cuts and dump offs in there, he's got a good number of putbacks, some post ups mixed in with the spot ups. He actually grades out as a roll and cut big, which was odd. Is that usage? Does that usage make sense to you? Is he just super athletic and someone that it was tough to, keep off the glass, or was he misused perhaps offensively, or does Tim need to go check his formula?
I mean, I wouldn't have expected that to come out that way, but he just does a little bit of everything. So I think it's hard to really pinpoint a certain role that he played at the college level, because I think he does a little bit of everything. And they had two ball-heavy guards with Nigel Pack and Isaiah Wong, and he did some stuff on the ball a little bit, but was more of an off-ball guy. And they'd play some small ball stuff as well. So I think he did a little bit of everything. So it was tough to pinpoint what he actually was this past year. But that's why I like him, though, is because he can do a lot of different things and you can be creative with him.
Yeah, he sounds like an interesting piece defensively. and then offensively just being able to, you're not drawing up plays for him. He's just able to make some stuff happen. And if he can do that in addition to shooting passively from the perimeter, I don't know, that's a unique style of guy that I think could have some usefulness at the NBA level.
Yeah. One more thing to note with him, though, is he is a lot older than a lot of the other players. He was a fifth-year college guy, was at George Mason for his first 3 years and at Miami the last 2 years. So he is on the older end of things, but I don't think that matters too much, especially in the second round. You just want to find a good basketball players who can contribute. And if his shot comes around, I think he is going to be fitting that. So would be very intrigued if they pick him.
Between the 3 second-round guys that we've talked about, who do you see as having the highest long-term potential?
Highest long-term potential. It's really tough because all 3. I think Seth Lundy maybe, just because of how much movement shooting he's shown. But I would probably, like, if you were just to ask me like who I would take out of these 3, I think I would go with Jordan Milner of the 3, just who I would prefer them to take. But like, I think when you look at someone like Lundy and Strother, it's tough to really root out their ceiling because we've seen these guys who are nuclear shooters from 3. They just bring so much value to an offense from a spacing and gravity standpoint that still has like a ceiling in itself, or that is some upside, even if they aren't doing some stuff on the ball. But I just think what Jordan Miller can do on both ends of the floor while being able to be a good shooter, it gives him the best path to be an impactful NBA player. But yeah, in terms of ceiling, I think they all have a tough one to like gauge who has the highest one of those 3.
All right. Good to know. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, Zach, thank you so much for coming on, man. As always, I'm going to do that again. I'll get this out. Zach, thank you for coming on. Plug what you have, my friend. Tag the Roll community with Mark Schindler. You guys are also on Playback doing awesome stuff. WNBA stuff's going on. I'm sure Mark's all into that.
Yeah, so check us out whenever we're live. We haven't been live as much recently, but just tag the Roll on Playback. Follow me on Twitter, Zach Milner 13. I actually just released a NBA range shooting database today. I did it last year as well, where I go to Synergy and their shot charts, and you're able to get their shot distances. There's a little bit of room for error because they only let you filter by a full inch, by a full foot. So they have 24 feet you can go out to, while the NBA line is 23.9. So there's a few inches of missing data there, unfortunately. But you are still able to get a good idea of what these college players shot from NBA distance. So I just released that this year, and I have that data going back to 2020. But yeah, Mark and I on Playback, we've been doing WNBA stuff, but this offseason after the draft, we're actually going to go back and watch some old college games. So if you want to go watch CJ McCollum at Lehigh and do some of like those backfill evaluation stuff. So yeah, those will be fun.
Well, thanks so much for joining us, man. I'm going to try to play this. I changed how I'm streaming. We're going to end the stream here, try to play this outro video again. But thank you so much for doing this every Monday, Tuesday, Thursday of this off season. Holidays not withstanding. So, Tim, let the people know we're going to be here on Playback more often.
Yeah, make sure to join us tomorrow. We will be back, and we've got a couple of topics on the agenda. We'll be doing some additional deep diving into prospects, looking at some film, looking at some data. We will also, in addition to that, cover a larger NBA news story, which is Bradley Beal being traded to the Phoenix Suns, the ramifications of that, what the rest of Phoenix's offseason might look like, and then what this means for the Lakers and the rest of the West moving forward. In addition, we will also take a quick look at some bigger picture approaches the Lakers can take this offseason. What does the cap sheet need to look like if they want to do a sign and trade for a point guard? What would it look like if they wanted to get the full MLE versus the taxpayer MLE? What key pieces do we need to keep an eye out for with this draft that'll fall into place? And then from a free agency standpoint, should we be worried about losing Rui or losing Reeves, losing D'Lo? If you don't get D'Lo, who do you get? Like some of those bigger picture approaches. So stick around. Find us here at the same link, playback.tv/Lakers Watch Party. If you're watching on YouTube, join us live, and we'll have some fun stuff here, interactive. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Always a fun time in the chat. Thank you again, Zach. And thanks, Tom, for putting together these great videos. This is a nice way for everyone who has not watched all that much of these guys, but wants to get up to speed quickly to be able to see the good, the bad, not just the highlights, but be able to, truly get a sense of like, what does the guy look like? I feel like highlight film, and that was my comment earlier in the chat, if you look at just, made shots, okay, those are highlights. If you look at like play after play after play of a guy, that's really more where you get to see, that's more real film work. And I'm glad that we were able to do that. So yeah, thanks again, everyone. Excited to see y'all tomorrow.